What I want to go through now is I want to start on the Zera Shimshon's Chidush. The topic of tonight's class on the Parashat is going to be a similar topic both for the Zera Shimshon and Rav Ari Leib Heyman, and that is going to be the very, very special, the most special day of the week, and that is Shabbat. So, as an introduction, give me a moment to give a little rundown of what's been going on in the past 5 Torah portions, the 5 last Torah portions in the book of Exodus, and then we're going to jump into Shabbat in a very, very strong and inspiring way, please God. So the last 5 Torah portions in the book of Exodus are Truma, Titzaveh, Kitisa, Vayakhel, and then Pikudei. Sometimes we end up reading these 2 parashas together, like this week, like this year. Sometimes we split them up. This year it's not a leap year, so we're going to read them together. But I believe next year is a leap year, so we're going to have Vayakhel and Pikudei split up. Nevertheless, let me give you a quick synopsis of what goes on in these last 5 Torah portions as a review. So in the Parashat of Terumah, the Mishkan fundraising and building directions are given. So Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu to fundraise for the Mishkan, and then the directions, the actual building doesn't take place, but the directions of how to build the Mishkan is commanded. Tetzaveh is the fabrication of Aharon HaKohen's garments for service. Aaron and all the Kohanim, we know there's 4 regular garments plus an extra 4 for Aharon Kohen Gadol, the high priest. Ki Tisa speaks about the collecting of the half shekel. This was last week's Torah portion, and the infamous sin of the golden calf. This week we are reading in Parashat Vayakhel the Mishkan fundraising and actual construction, unlike Truma, which was just the directions for the construction. And in Pikudei, it's a summary and put together and a setup of the entire Mishkan. So some of these parashas are quite repetitive, especially Vayakhel and Truma and Tetzaveh do have a lot of similarities, but the Torah did spend an extensive amount of time detailing the Mishkan and its service and how it shall be constructed and conducted. Right, take a look at your screen. Where is it? Here we go. So this is the beginning of this week's Torah portion. This is in Exodus chapter 35, verse 1. And it goes as follows. Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Yisrael. And Moshe, he actually gathers from the terminology of Kehillah, Lakel. Vayakhel Moshe et kol adat b'nei Yisrael. He gathers all of the Jewish people, Vayomer alehem, and he tells them, Ele hadevarim, these are the things, asher tzivah Hashem la'asot otam, these are the things that the Lord commanded to make. What did he intend? He was intending on telling the Jewish people exactly how to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. Takes a huge pause, and before getting into that, he throws in this verse. This is in chapter 35, verse 2. Sheshet yamim te'aseh melacha. 6 days of the week we shall work. Ubayom hashvi yeh lachem kodesh. On the 7th day, however, shall be a day of holiness. Shabbat Shabbaton Lashem, a day of complete rest for Hashem. Kol ha'oseh bo melacha yumat, whoever performs a melacha, which is work, something prohibited on Shabbat, shall be put to death. That severe is the punishment of one who desecrates the Shabbat. Now, the Zera Shimshon addresses 2 different aspects. So, well, it's really the same, and I'm going to give both of his answers. This is the very first portion of the Zera Shimshon on this week's Torah portion, and he wants to know, why is it that Moses decides right now to warn the Jewish people about keeping Shabbat? Why now is number 1. And number 2 is, why this mitzvah? It seems out of order. It seems like Moses is getting ready. The Zera Shimshon reminds us that this assembly, this Vayakhel, was the following day after Yom Kippur, the 11th day of Tishrei. What happened on Yom Kippur since the Jewish people left Egypt? was the day that they finally, after 80 days of supplication, Moses on behalf of the Jewish people, were finally forgiven for the sin of the golden calf. That was Yom Kippur. Next day, Moses comes and he tells them, God told me this is how we're going to achieve our perfect and hopefully everlasting atonement. And it's going to be through the Mishkan. So he gathers them. He tells them, this is what we're going to do. Pause. I want to warn you about a special mitzvah, the mitzvah of Shabbat. So Zera Shimshon wants to know, why now? Why the pause? Like, what's the urgency? Secondly, out of all mitzvot that he wants to use to reiterate its importance, why is he choosing the mitzvah of Shabbat? So Rashi, first of all, tells us one part. Rashi tells us that a person might think, I think we mentioned this last week, a person might think that, oh, the construction of the temple, of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle is so important that maybe it overrides Shabbat observance. Maybe we should be building and constructing the Mishkan even on Shabbat, not just 6 days as they had, 6 days a week as they had a mandate and a commandment to do, but even on the 7th, even on Shabbat. Therefore, Rashi says, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the Jewish people, stop. On 6 days you work, 7th you rest. So what was the rush? The Zera Shimshon wants to know. Was there a rush for the Jewish people to get this Mishkan built? Well, it seems like yes, but he reminds us not. We've learned this midrash over the past couple years more than once, so I'm sure our veterans, our regulars, will remember this midrash. It's a very famous midrash. The midrash tells us that in truth, the Mishkan finished being built on the 25th of Kislev. The 25th of Kislev is a very special day of the year. That's the first day of Chanukah. But mind you, this happened. I don't have a timeline in front of me, but this is over 1,000 years before the Chanukah miracle. Nevertheless, it was completed on the 25th day of Kislev. So, if we backtrack, the 11th of Tishrei was when Hashem and Moses commanded everyone to get the Mishkan going. It took them 2 days to fundraise till Moses had to come and say, stop, we have enough. And then the next 72 days, which brings us to the 25th of Kislev, was how long it took them to actually put together the Mishkan, build all of its components. 72 days. 2 days of fundraising, 72 days of construction. Very good. Tells us the Midrash, do you know that the day that they inaugurated the Mishkan, that they actually built it and put together and started using it, was not on the 25th of Kislev. Rather it was, it's going to be corresponding to this weekend, or actually next week, to Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The first day of Nisan is when the Mishkan actually was erected and used for the first time in its service. So the Zera Shimshon says, what's the rush? Why would Bnei Israel back then think that they have to build the Mishkan 7 days a week, not 6 days a week, if anyways there was such a long wait until the Mishkan was being put up? This is Zera Shimshon's question. So he says is this. He says the Jewish people may have thought, okay, so just as a side note, the reason why the Mishkan was waited to be put up till Nisan is because that was when Yitzchak Avinu's birthday was. So to invoke Yitzchak Avinu's commitment and self-sacrifice as he displayed during the Akedat Yitzchak with his father, we waited till then. Hashem wanted to invoke that for the Jewish people. So what happened is that the Jewish people, says Zera Shimshon says, the Jewish people may have thought that since the Mishkan is so important, of course not during the preparation and the building of it may one come to break Shabbat in order to construct it. That everyone knew. It's an obvious, as we just said, there wasn't even a rush to put it together. But what happened if there would need to be any type of repair or renovation once the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash would be already in service and built and being used? Maybe one would say, since it is so important to serve Hashem in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, or in the temple, maybe we should go and fix it even if it's on Shabbat, renovate or update or whatever the case, maintenance is. Comes Moshe Rabbeinu and says, even in the future, one should not desecrate the Shabbat in order to maintain, upkeep, or renovate the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash. This is the Zera Shimshon's first answer. We'll go on to the second one in a moment, but based on this, I want to share a short lesson. The lesson is as follows. The Talmud says, whoever cooks for Shabbat will eat on Shabbat. Because you can't cook on Shabbat. So if you want to eat on Shabbat, you got to cook before Shabbat. And that's just a metaphor to a greater, larger scheme and a more important lesson. And that is, whoever cooks, so to say, in this world, whoever prepares themselves by filling themselves up with Torah and mitzvot in this world, will be able to eat in the world to come, will be able to enjoy the merit that they are deserved and the reward that they are deserving of in the world to come. This world is like the weekdays. It's the time for us to work hard and to put in our efforts. And the world to come is like Shabbat. It's Yom Shekulo Shabbat. It's a everlasting day of Shabbat. That is Mashiach, and that is the world to come. So for that reason, the lesson I would like to bring out from this is that a person should realize that just as when we come to the Shabbat table, whether you prepared it yourself, or you helped your spouse do it, or you toiled hard to pay to buy whatever it is that you're eating or enjoying from on Shabbat, so too we have to understand, we have to put an emphasis and toil and work hard on that which will give us our reward and our merit in the world to come. So that's the first answer to Zera Shimshon. In all honesty, amazing answer, short to the point. The second answer, I think, is much deeper and much richer, as you'll see in a moment. So, again, to reiterate the question, why does Moses pause now to give them a different lesson? And why specifically the lesson of Shabbat? Take a look at the following. The Zera Shimshon quotes the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat, page 118b, that says that the Jewish people, unfortunately, did not complete fulfilling and observing the very first Shabbat that they were given. When was this? This was the Shabbat right after they emerged from the Yam Suf, from the Sea of Reeds. And at that point, the Jewish people, they complained that they were hungry. So what did Hashem do? He sent them manna, the wonder bread. And one of the rules with the manna, right, there were several of them. One of the rules of the manna was, on Friday, go out and pick double, because on Shabbat there's not going to be any. Don't go out and take some on Shabbat, because there won't be any there. But go pull it out, go take double the portion on Friday. Why? Because you're not allowed to carry. One of the prohibitions that there are on Shabbat is you're not allowed to carry unless there is an eruv, an enclosure, whether it's a house, whether it's a fence, whether it's anything that halachically qualifies as some type of boundary. So for that reason, nothing came, no man fell on Shabbat, so this way people would not have to transport the man from the field, from wherever they found it, all the way into their homes. What happened that very first Shabbat? Two Jews, Datan and Aviram, the infamous two Jews who were challenging God and Moses on and on. They went out and they put bread there. They put the manna there to make it look, you see, Moshe Rabbeinu's not for real. He's not telling us the truth. Some fell. Now we know that the birds came and ate it, but nevertheless, those two Jews desecrated Shabbat because they transported from in their houses out to the field. Says the Gemara, the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat, that because the Jewish people never fulfilled, never observed fully as a complete unit The very first Shabbat. This gave power for the other nations to dominate over them. And if they would have fulfilled the very first Shabbat, the Jewish people would have had never any adversaries that could have overcome them at all. The Gemara further states that anyone who keeps Shabbat with all of its laws, meaning everything that you've learned and you know about it and you fulfill it properly, even if the individual worships idols, as in the generation of Enosh, the grandson of Adam Arishon, all of the person's sins will be forgiven. Idolatry, which is one of the three cardinal sins, one which God has absolutely no toleration for, cannot at all. Still, if a person is diligent in observing Shabbat, they will be forgiven. The Zera Shimshon brings another piece of Talmud. The Talmud is in Masechet Avodah Zarah, page 5a. The Talmud says that if the Jewish people would not have committed the sin of the golden calf, also there would have been no nation that would have any ability to dominate over them. So the Zera Shimshon wants to know why. Why is this? Why is it that if the Jewish people would have kept Shabbat the first time, no nation could have dominated over them? And why is it that if the Jewish people would have not sinned with the golden calf, no nation could have dominated over them? He quotes the pasuk. This is in chapter 32 in Exodus, verse 16, and it may be found on your screen. Vehaluchot maaseh Elohim hema. The tablets, the two tablets, the 10 commandments on them, were tablets that were God's work. V'amichtav michtav Elohim hu. And the inscription was also an inscription of God. Harut al haluchot. They were engraved on the tablets. This word, the Zera Shimshon pays attention to, charut, which literally means engraved, can also, without the nekudot, be read as cherut. Cherut, for any of our Hebrew-speaking guests on tonight's class, understand that cherut means freedom. Charut means engraved, same letters. Cherut means freedom. Explains the Zera Shimshon that one who keeps the Torah, that which was engraved, is making them free from any other type of enslavement and hardship and oppression from any others. When a person heeds to that which it says in the Torah, specifically the 10 Commandments, which includes not serving and worshiping idols and observing the Shabbat, what they are doing is they are freeing themselves, cherut, freedom. They are freeing themselves from any other oppression or domination. Moshe Rabbeinu was pleading for the Jewish people, as we said earlier, for 80 days. Finally, Yom Kippur, he was forgiven. You know the first message he wanted to give the Jewish people, the first warning? Shabbat. Why Shabbat? Because Moshe wanted them to understand how important Shabbat is. He wanted them to know how sad it was that they weren't able to fulfill and observe that first Shabbat. It would have avoided everything. It would have avoided the sin, the golden calf. It would have avoided the whole concept of Yom Kippur. Can you imagine? Listen to what the Zera Shimshon says. I would not be able to say it if he did not write this. He writes that if the Jewish people would have observed that very first Shabbat, there would be no concept of prayer. We would not need to pray. We would not have to bring any sacrifices ever. There would never be any danger that befalls the Jewish people. There would be no such thing and no concept of Yom Kippur and Teshuvah. It would have led us into the Yom Shekulo Shabbat, the everlasting day of Shabbat, if they would have fulfilled that very first Shabbat. It's a very, very serious point that Zera Shimshon is bringing across over here. Moses is telling the Jewish people, at least protect your future. You know how you will protect your future? By observing the Sabbath, by observing Shabbat. Observing Shabbat, says the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat, brings the Geulah, brings redemption, the everlasting redemption. The Talmud says, if the Jewish people would keep 2 Shabbats, observe 2 Shabbats as a whole, Mashiach would come right away. Now, there's different opinions. Is it 2 in a row? Or is it that second Shabbat, right? The Jewish people kept the second Shabbat. The first Shabbat was the Tana Aviram. They messed that up. The second Shabbat they kept. Then, unfortunately, it was downhill from there. Not everyone kept it anymore. Do we need 1 more Shabbat altogether, or do we still need 2? Nevertheless, it's only 2 Shabbats in total that would bring Mashiach immediately. That which we have been all waiting for thousands of years. Moshe wanted them to focus on Shabbat. He didn't want them to overlook that important mitzvah. He wanted them to know, you know why we even have this Mishkan? To make up for the sin of the golden calf is because Shabbat was not kept diligently. Moshe was telling them this now. Right now he was telling them, this Mishkan, before the tabernacle, understand that Mishkan comes from the terminology of mashkon, a collateral. Hashem is just giving this to us as a collateral that, unfortunately, if we do sin, he'll take it away from us like we've had, unfortunately. But prior to all of this, more important than anything else, the Zera Shimshon says, Moshe was giving them a speech, a message, a warning about Shabbat, how Shabbat will preserve the temple from being destroyed, preserve our Jewish families in surviving the exiles, and eventually being redeemed. So the lesson I want to share with you all, based on the Zera Shimshon, is remembering the reason why Hashem commanded us to observe Shabbat is to be like Him, to emulate Him. That the same way God created the world in 6 days and He rested on the 7th, we are to also. By us keeping Shabbat, by us not working on Shabbat, we are testifying in the creation of the world that it was done by God Himself. Melacha, the famous word for work, prohibited actions on Shabbat, is not hard work, it's creation. Because God ceased from creating. God ceased on the 7th day whatever He was doing on the first 6 days. Was God working hard on the first 6 days? No, God can't work hard. There's no such thing as hard for God. God created, and then He ceased from creating. So we are to cease from creating on the 7th day of the week, just as God did. Where do we learn what creating is? From the Mishkan. That's why it's juxtaposed over here. All of the actions that the Jewish people went into creating the Mishkan, based on Hashem's directives, that's where we learn what we're not allowed to do on Shabbat. But what can we do? We can all learn more about Shabbat. We can take small steps in the right direction, which is, I always repeat, is all that counts. Small steps in the right direction. Do we understand how Shabbat preserves us as a nation and as a family unit? What would our lives look like? What would our families look like if we did not have that 25-hour recharge every single week where we're able to come together with our family, with our friends, with our community, but specifically our family, and share about our weeks, share about our goals and aspirations, share in spirituality, share in physicality, as we learned last week, is an important aspect of Shabbat as well, that we're not held accountable for. Rather, we're just given complete blessing for it. When else would we have that routine and that opportunity? And that's why there are many families, even if they're not able to observe Shabbat properly or 100% because they're still learning, but many families understand, many traditional families understand the importance of coming together Friday night for the meal and Shabbat morning, Shabbat lunchtime for the meal. The Shabbat meals is what keeps the family together. The Shabbat as a whole is what keeps the Jewish people together committed to God, refocusing our goals, making sure that we are always traveling in the right direction, which is the direction of being closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is what I wanted to share from you from the Zera Shimshon on this week's Torah portion.